Hello, Iris J here with Madrona's Pulse Teachings, Astrology for Healing. I am here continuing on with a series that I started some months ago and life interrupted as it does. And so I'm coming back to it now, and this is going through the houses. So there are videos on the 4th and the 8th house. And today I'm going to finish out the water houses by talking with you about the 12th house. I want to let you know right now that in this little cabin that I cohabitate in with many beings, there is some music, acoustic music being made, and those soundscapes might drift in. This is just the timing of when I can make this video, but I feel that soundscapes drifting in are kind of just part of the 12th house. It just works with it because we are in the realm of beyond day-to-day meaning. We are in the realm of dreamscapes and soundscapes and artscapes and mediascapes and naturescapes, and we are in the realm of liminality and all that is beyond what society has been constructed around. So we're going to talk about this energy. If this is your first, there are a lot of animals and there's a bit of a wildness in this house today, so we'll see who interrupts us. If this is your first time on my channel, hello and welcome to all of you who this is not your first time on my channel. I am Iris. I talk about astrology, spirituality, healing. I'm also a cultural theorist, so that gets woven in here and there. And if this is the first time on your channel, please subscribe. It really helps us small channels do our thing. And let's talk about the 12th house. Now, like the 8th house and the 4th house, this is a water house, which means there's a lot of depth, and there's a lot of depth in the 12th house. Also, like the 8th house, for better or worse, if there's a lot out there in these digital realms, especially pop astrology, that can just phrase information around the 12th house in a somewhat alarming way. It's unfortunate. If you have a stellium in this 12th house, it does not mean that you are destined to live a life of suffering. That can be out there. There are some difficult experiences that can be aligned with the 12th house, and I'm going to contextualize them because often what doesn't happen in pop astrology and sometimes in astrology itself is that these archetypal journeys don't get contextualized in terms of what the energy is about, and that makes all the difference. So let's start with what the energy is about in the 12th house. This is the final house of the zodiac. We have gone all the way around the zodiac. Sometimes you'll hear the 12th house referred to as if it's pregnant with everything that's come before, because in astrology, each house energy builds and it expands, but we don't disconnect from everything that came before. All of that energy is still present. It's just not the energy that is kind of rising to the focus. And in the 12th house, literally all of the houses and the energies and the archetypes that have come before are here. And so there's a lot of depth to that. There's a lot of depth because it literally is part of the archetype of the 12th house is the collective unconscious. It is the oceanic depths. We are in water in all the water houses, but the 12th house is the ocean. The 12th house quintessential archetypal meaning is a dissolving of ego. This identity, Iris, who I am, dissolving as I reunite with source. Source energy, whether we use the word source, spirit, divine mystery, God consciousness, nature, earth consciousness, whatever language resonates with you in your practices. But the idea is that that ego, that self, that started developing in the first house and started picking up all these different aspects of selfhood and relational selfhood, and then relating to what is beyond our own one-on-one relationships, the world, meaning. We get to the 12th house, and here that self dissolves, and the drive of 12th house energy is to return to source, is to experience that oceanic flowing with all that is. This is why it's all emotions. It's the most beautiful, mystical experience of oneness in which there's just this crystallized experience of light and beauty, and it is also the depths of grief, and it is all of it, sometimes at once, sometimes different aspects of it, and it is a lot of energy. And part of what can be disorienting about the 12th house is that because it's the dissolving of ego, if we have a lot of placements there, it can be confusing because we're still feeling it and we still have an ego and an identity. And part of the practice is learning to go into sometimes expressive art making or modalities that help us just release whatever it is we're feeling. Because in the 12th house, we can't necessarily separate what we feel from who we are. It's supposed to be without boundary. That's the archetype, the ocean. The boundaries are the shoreline, right? But when we're in the ocean, there is just such fluid movement and depth, and that is to be embodied in the 12th house, and it's part of what we're here to do. The difficulty often with 12th house experiences and identities is that we have a society that is absolutely not structured around the reality of 12th house experiences. We have a society that focuses really on that 10th house Capricorn energy in different aspects of the chart, but there's so much about earth boundary making, ideas of success, ideas of what the reason we're here to be is, ideas of checking our boxes. 12th house, what boxes? Why would I? Taxes? What? Like, this is part of 12th house energy because it is beyond, and it's supposed to be beyond. It's part of the zodiac that we refer to as transpersonal. And so knowing that that drive is there of the ego to dissolve, to have these experiences, these spiritual experiences, mystical experiences, when I use that language, it's important to note that the 12th house is about my mystical experience where my ego breaks down and I experience that oneness. It is not, and it's about the experiential mode of spirituality. The idea of religion, which traditionally some of those experiences have been discussed and brought into theology, that's 9th house energy. That's creating structures and meanings of understanding. 12th house is I'm just in the experience of it. And so part of the difficulty comes in that we have these experiences and yet we're expected to move in Western culture and make our way through a world that has very little value, let alone collective understanding and or education in what it's like to have strong 12th house lives. And going back to that drive of this, the ego self dissolving, well, there's a lot of ways that can happen. That can happen through meditation. That can happen through phenomenological experience of the mystical. That can also happen through substances. That can happen through guided journeys with traditional earth medicines, and it can happen through addiction with pharmaceuticals. It can happen through all different types of addiction. And so this is where some of the 12th house language that you'll see in especially kind of pop astrology is, if you have this, you're going to have a life of addiction. No, that's not what the 12th house is saying. Addiction can definitely be a theme. The use of substances can be a theme. And here, I think one of the most important in that, and I want to say as it's coming up, it can be a theme in our own lives and or it can be a theme in our lives, families, loved ones. Another piece that you will see discussed in terms of the 12th house is also suicide. Again, not necessarily for the self, but could be a theme in the self's life, could be something that comes up in our consciousness. And again, we're letting go of attachments, especially with addiction, of this is good, this is bad. And the drive is the dissolving of the ego. The drive can also be the dissolving of pain that is attached to ego. The idea being that there's an archetypal drive that knows this pain is not entirely real are all that there is. It knows that there's a connective way of being with spirit, and that is what 12th house is here to experience and to know. And often if we have a lot of 12th house energies, we can also be someone who's here to bring those depths and beyond the veil experiences into the collective. You can be a teacher. You can be a teacher in all the ways that teacher shows up, whether you're an artist or an actual teacher, or just the way that you live your life and you model the way that the mystical can be brought into the daily, because this is absolutely part of 12th house energy and how it works with its 6th house polarity, which is all about daily living. We can be types of guides if you have strong 12th house energy. And yet it is, to have a lot of 12th house energy is not an easy path, not because that's the nature of the 12th house, but because of the nature of the society that we've constructed. And going back to what I was saying about substances, addiction, I think one of the lessons that the 12th house can offer us, if we have a lot of placements, and if addiction is something that has come up in our own personal lives, and there's so many reasons why it comes up, is that there is an ability in the psyche to reunite with source type energy, to have mystical experiences, and actually not need substances to be able to go there through the way of life. It's also probably going to require a potentially disciplined life, 6th house polarity, in which we really work to be of service to ourselves and of service to our mind and body connection. Working with the polarity there becomes very important, because the 6th house is how we ground, especially if you have a lot of 12th house energy. The 6th house is how we ground some of these experiences that are just beyond the day-to-day. And it's by creating routines and or practices. Routines really don't work for everyone. And sometimes, but when I use the word routine, it could be that, well, my routine is that I do what my body needs on this day, right? So maybe I get up every day at 8, or maybe I get up some days at 5 and some days at 10. Maybe, it depends what our own mind body needs. And this is why astrology, as a modality for healing and emotional and mental and physical and spiritual wellness, it can actually be quite different than something like a Western psychology that's modeled after cognitive behavioral therapy or certain approaches to wellness, because a lot of those models actually work with this kind of one projected idea that this is what is good, this is structure, this is health, and astrology says, well, I got Uranus sitting right there, and my daily life needs to change. It needs to change at different points in my life. So astrology is a different route into our own needs, and also showing us stories of how we're going to relate to those kind of societal stories as well. And the 12th house is beyond those societal norms, and it is experiences of richness, and like I said, the depths of beauty. And also there's going to be grief. Grief is a theme of 12th house energy, partly because it's just part of this human experience. And yet the grief that comes up there, I mean, think about the ocean. Like, there are depths that humans have yet to understand, and there's so much in there. But in the 12th house experience, we're really not separating something like this is joy and this is good and this is grief and this is bad. They're totally entwined. And the idea is that we just feel the whole spectrum. And so part of the practice of 12th house energy is to unlearn some of the attachments that we get socialized to hold, especially attachments to this is good and this is bad, and to learn for ourselves in our own ways, in our own embodied ways, in our own practices, how to find meaning and value in these deep realms of feeling. And often the 12th house requires non-normative language, that being poetry, visual art, music, theater, clay, nature, all the different ways of communicating, of belonging, that we can experience as humans. Belonging is another one. The 12th house experience can bring a journey of alienation and belonging for the individual. And this is, again, as I said, there can be alienation from mainstream society that could show up in one's family, depending what type of family one is born into. And it's also, you know, it's a very particular journey of alienation and belonging, because the point of the 12th house is to learn that we always belong. No matter what society has taught us, whether it's taught us that we don't belong because of certain aspects of our identity, whether that's race, gender, mental, physical ability, sexuality, religion, the way they all intersect, whether it's coming from those societal structures, whether it's coming from family structures, and that may be our way of being. Like if you have a lot of 12th house energy, you're most likely were a pretty sensitive child, and sometimes those really intense sensitivities of children just aren't met in the school system, in the family. And so there's this journey of alienation, but from the astrological perspective, that journey is one where we're actually to journey through those immense feelings and potentially discover this essence of belonging that can never be taken away and is always here, because we do always belong with source, divine mystery. We are always co-creating. And that is a wisdom that 12th house energy has access to. Honestly, like that, if 12th house energy can learn how to break through some of the attachments, and especially break through some of what can be emotional and psychological pain at mainstream society, not embracing 12th house ways, there can be such immediate connection with the divine. And then there can be a struggle to come back. come back into the 6th house and come back into the day-to-day living. And this is the complexity, right? Because the 12th house archetype, it's like, it's beyond, it's done. But we also got something in the 6th house, and we also got Mars up there in maybe the 8th house, or we got something in the 2nd house. Like, we are this interlayered matrix of all these archetypes. And so that's the journey that each of us are on, or learning how to embody and work with all the intersecting archetypes, add in the transits, and we can talk forever about the complexities and nuances of astrology. And the 12th house really takes us there. So this is, I mean, I could easily talk for days about any of the houses. So this is just an introduction to the 12th house with more detail than I give in a quick going through the houses all in one go. And hopefully there's little tidbits there that you can pull with you and just leave the rest. Be well.